Hi there and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's February 11th, and there are just 37 days until the first day of spring. Today we celebrate a woman who was insatiable when it came to plants, and she's remembered forever with the Portland rose. We'll learn about a famous speech given at a Vermont botanical club about why botany wasn't taught in schools, and the reasons were pretty spot on. We'll hear a story about a beautiful cherry tree found near the Sakabe Hotel. And we grow that garden library today with a book about Darwin's plants. In addition to his theory of evolution, Darwin experimented and observed plants extensively at his home in Kent. And then we'll wrap things up by getting you ready for Valentine's Day with a few of my favorite garden-inspired verses about love. But first, I just want to remind you that you can always head over to thedailygardener.org. That's the website for the show. When you're there, you'll see all of the show notes for all the episodes, along with blog posts for all of the poetry and botanical history and botanic sparks that have been shared on the show. And finally, don't forget to sign up for the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can do that over on the website as well. It's right there on the homepage. And then once you do that, you'll get a little garden letter from me every single Friday. It'll have enough botanical history and literature to get you through the weekend, along with garden gift ideas, recipes, and so forth. And finally, if you'd like to send me any pictures of your garden or birthday wishes for a fellow gardener, just send them to my email at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. Here's today's curated news. Today's news is from House and Garden, and it was written by Charlie Harper, and I loved the topic. It's gardening as a salve for stress and anxiety. It's a gardener's personal story. And Charlie starts out this post this way. He writes, "To say that gardening saved my life wouldn't be far from the truth. After 7 years studying architecture, I started to realize that sitting at a computer day and night wasn't for me." And so Charlie made a life-altering decision that took him a long time to come to terms with. And he realized that somewhere along the line, he had lost contact with the natural world. Now, in a fascinating twist, both Charlie's grandfather and his uncle were garden photographers, so he grew up surrounded by garden and plant imagery. And ultimately, he returned to London with the aim of working in garden design. Charlie writes, "I started by getting my soft-skinned, CAD-weary hands dirty again as a volunteer at a local garden, and instantly I felt like the work was breathing life back into me." And I love what he wrote here. I just want to share this little part with you. He said, "I remember the first time I carefully sowed tomatoes, planted my first apple tree, when I weeded out my first strand of goosegrass, and ate my first homegrown courgette. But most of all, I remember when a smile returned to my face after years of absence. There have been countless times since when I have found myself standing amidst a sea of herbaceous perennials and laughing simply because the idea of these things growing out of the ground made so much sense." Well, this is a fantastic article I know you will love it. And if you'd like to read the rest of it for yourself, and I hope that you do, just search for the word gardener in the Facebook group for the show, and Charlie's story will pop up. Remember, the subtitle is A Gardener's Personal Story, and the keyword is gardener. So there you go. Now, if you're not in the Facebook group, it's so easy to join. All you need to do is the next time you're on Facebook, just hop on up to the search bar and type in Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend, and then request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the British aristocrat, naturalist, plant lover, and botanist, Margaret Cavendish Bentinck, who was born on this day, February 11th, in 1715. Margaret was known as the Duchess of Portland, but her friends and family called her Maria. Maria married when she was 19 years old. And together, she and William Bentinck had 5 children. One of their sons became a prime minister twice. And when William died, after their 27th anniversary, Maria threw herself into her many passions. As the wealthiest woman in England, Maria could acquire virtually any treasure from the natural world during her lifetime, and she did. She cultivated an enormous collection of natural history, which was tended by 2 experts she hired personally to attend to each item, the naturalist Reverend John Lightfoot and the Swedish botanist Daniel Solander. Maria's home in Buckinghamshire was referred to by society as the Hive. It was a reference to the hub of activity that went on there for Solander and Lightfoot and the other people who helped process Maria's acquisitions. At one point, Maria had reached out to Captain James Cook, and he helped Maria secure some shells from his second expedition to Australia. Meanwhile, Daniel Solander was focused on cataloging Maria's massive shell collection, but sadly, he left the work unfinished when he died in 1782. Maria had an enormous appetite for curation and collecting, and in addition to her botanic garden on her property, Maria opened a zoo, and she kept rabbits, and even had an aviary. A constant stream of scientists, explorers, socialites, and artists visited Maria to exchange ideas and inspect her collections. And think about the limitless ambition she must have had. As Lightfoot wrote about, Maria wanted, quote, every unknown species in the 3 kingdoms of nature described and published to the world. Now, Maria had a special love for collecting plants and flowers from far-off places worldwide. She retained the botanist and the incomparable botanical illustrator George Dionysius Errett as a drawing instructor. She had been struck by the luminescence of his work, and she even bought over 300 of his paintings. And Maria also became friends with the great botanical artist Mary Delaney. Mary made botanical paper mosaics, as she called them. She was essentially creating flower specimens out of tissue paper. And Mary was exacting, dissecting real flowers and then replicating what she saw with tissue paper. To gather more material for her work, Maria and Mary loved to go out into the fields and collect specimens together. As the Duchess of Portland, Maria shared her specimens with the public, and she displayed her various collections from around the globe in what she called her Portland Museum. Once in 1800, Maria received a rose from Italy, which became known as the Portland rose in her honor. The rose was a beautiful crimson scarlet with round petals, and it was a repeat bloomer. And here's a fun fact. All Portland roses were developed from that very first Portland rose, the sweet gift to Margaret Cavendish Bentinck, Maria, the Duchess of Portland. And it was on this day, February 11th, in 1896, that the Burlington Free Press shared a story called Vermont's Flora, Winter Meeting of the State Botanical Club. Generally speaking, these early botanical meetings can err on the side of rules and regulation, and they can be a little boring to read. However, the account of this meeting caught my eye. The meeting started, as per usual, with a discussion of nomenclature. Here, the club decided to follow the lead of Harvard in the way they pronounced botanical names. But then things got interesting because the topic changed to how should botany be taught in schools after an address given by Reverend J.A. Bates. Bates began his popular presentation by stating that he could begin his speech like the boy who wrote a paper about the snakes of Ireland. The paper began, "There are no snakes in Ireland." Reverend Bates found himself in the same situation for his speech. How should botany be taught in schools? Well, as the Reverend Bates began to speak, he bluntly pointed out that there is no botany taught in schools. Bear in mind that this speech was made in 1896 when Reverend Bates said that, quote, only 1 in 40 students has studied botany. And I don't think we've moved the dial that much on that statistic. Then Bates attempts to explain why botany is not taught, and this is what caught my attention. He said, the chief reasons for botany not being taught in schools are twofold. First, most of the teachers are poorly prepared for teaching botany. And second, botanists are conservative and conceal the charms of their study behind the long Latin names. I love that. Concealing the charms of their study behind the long Latin names. That's one way of putting it. In Unearthed Words, today's words are from Naoko Abe, a Japanese journalist, author, and a 2016 Nihon Essayist Club Award winner, from her book, Cherry Ingram, the Englishman Who Saved Japan's Blossoms. Here's an excerpt. There, in a garden of a house near the Sakabe Hotel, towering above a tall wooden fence, stood a tree with narrow leaves and bunched clusters of double mauve-pink blossoms with close to 100 petals. Ingram's immediate reaction was to work out how to spirit cuttings of the tree to England. Fate was on his side. 19 years earlier, on his honeymoon, he had visited this very village while hunting birds, and he remembered meeting there a one-legged war hero whose parents ran the hotel. That man was still alive, a villager told Ingram. Indeed, he was now running the hotel, and his hobby was gardening. In typical Ingram fashion, he convinced the innkeeper to send him scions from the tree in exchange for 1 yen to cover the postage. By 1929, a couple of sturdy offspring were growing in his garden in Bentinck. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Darwin's Most Wonderful Plants by Ken Thompson. This book came out in 2019, and the subtitle is Darwin's Botany Today. In this book, Ken helps us understand Darwin as a botanist. After taking his famous voyage on the Beagle, Darwin experimented with and observed growing plants at his home in Kent. Carnivorous and climbing plants were a favorite of Darwin's, and he was fascinated by their pollination and flower evolution. Thanks to Ken, we get to know Darwin as a pioneering botanist who was way ahead of his time. Darwin's work seems totally in step with plant science today. He was looking at plant movement, hunting, and intelligence. This book is 256 pages of a side of Darwin that most folks have never known. Darwin as a curious and intelligent botanist. You can get a copy of Darwin's Most Wonderful Plants by Ken Thompson and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $14. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today, I thought I'd close the show by getting you ready for Valentine's Day with a few of my favorite garden-inspired verses about love. Here's one from Derek Jarman, the gardener poet. Violet has the shortest wavelength of the spectrum. Behind it, the invisible ultraviolet. Roses are red. Violets are blue. Poor Violet, violated for a rhyme. And here's one that's from Anonymous, but it's wonderful. If apples were pears and peaches were plums, and the rose had a different name. If tigers were bears and fingers were thumbs, I'd love you just the same. And here's a verse from Alfred Austin, the English poet laureate. So timely you came, and well you chose. You came when most needed my winter rose. From the snow I pluck you, and fondly press your leaves twixt the leaves of my leaflessness. And finally, here's a little quote from Russell Page, the British gardener, garden designer, and architect. Green fingers are the extension of a verdant heart. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. Hey, thanks for spending part of your day with The Daily Gardener. If you want to read even more botanical brevities, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. That's where you can find all the stories, biographies, and books that I share on the show. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. It has lots of goodies in it, and I try to make the newsletter like you're getting a marvelous letter from a garden friend. You can always find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Twitter, and you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can easily share your gardener greetings or book submissions by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove in Wyoming, Minnesota, with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, and Eric Begay. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.